so excited to be here this morning. As we all know, Concord has such a storied past and has played a significant role in American history. I love this picture of the North Bridge, and we'll be talking about, bridging the past into the future and what, we as women have done and what we're going to do as we move ahead over the next 100 years. It was the North Bridge, and at the North Bridge back in 1775 that the American Revolution began. But there's another really powerful story about how the women of Concord band together and fought to advance human rights over the years, fighting for the abolition of slavery, the right to vote, and the right to control one's fate. The new exhibit at the museum highlights a number of heroic women, and I'll just touch upon a few to set the stage. The first woman, Margaret Fuller, served as an overseas wartime correspondent. She was the first one to do that as a woman. And she was also Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson's editor. She once declared that women have, as the exhibit is named, every path laid open as freely as man for women. 75 years before the American women secured the right to vote, she said that statement. And then there was Mary Merrick Brooks, the daughter of Concord slave owner, and Ellen Garrison, a Black anti-slavery activist. They were both fierce advocates in the Concord Female Anti-Slavery Society. Yes, Concord had a very active female anti-slavery society. And here's another interesting fact about interesting women in Concord. Anne Bush was the first woman in America to get her driver's license, and that was back in 1900. The first woman in America to get her driver's license. We certainly felt like we had places to go, even way back when. So let's take a quick look at the progress we've made over the past 200 years and just touch on a few of the pioneering women who redefined what women could become. First, I'd like to start with Mary Louisa May Alcott. Many of us are familiar with the best-selling works that she wrote. I know my favorite was An Old-Fashioned Girl. But did you know that the commercial success of her books rescued her family from poverty back in 1863? Louisa was a successful working woman, which was truly modern for the times. And she used her platform to become the first woman in 1879 to vote in Concord School Committee elections. It took a Herculean amount of perseverance, demonstration, and rallying together to ratify the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, which was 41 years after Louisa cast her ballot in Concord. So let's fast forward now to 1970, when the Mary Tyler Moore Show first aired. The show presented a new type of role model, a young single woman with a career. It's crazy to think that that show started 4 years before the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed, which enabled women to open bank accounts on their own for the first time. Clearly, the show was ahead of its time. And Mary Tyler Moore became a symbol of what a woman with a career might look like, providing a powerful example that younger women could aspire to. I know I spent many a Saturday night watching Mary Tyler Moore. 35 years after that, when the Equal Opportunity Act was passed, we hit another major milestone, and that was in 2009, when Ursula Burns became the first African-American woman CEO to head a Fortune 500 company. That company was Xerox. And this year, in 2021, Whitney Wolfe Herd, CEO of Bumble, became the youngest woman to take a company public. She also became the world's youngest female self-made billionaire, and she created a unicorn. So if you take a step back for a second and look at this picture, we have come a long way. And I guess we've come a long way, baby. But we have a long way to go. So let's start and talk about that. So this morning, I'm going to spend my time on, first, what path are we currently on? How has the pandemic had an impact on women? And 5 pillars to the future. This is a very famous chart. What path are we really on? The truth is that in corporate America, women fall behind early. The data and the path we're on is rocky. And you can see, I'm going to try to put my cursor here, that right here, women and men enter the workforce now at just about equal amounts. And yet the path diverges pretty significantly at that first promotion. And then it just drops precipitously downward after that. That's the problem. And there's been a lot of effort and activity around getting women on boards, which is terrific, but you need more women in the pipeline to get more women on boards. And if you think this looks bad, you should see what it looks like for women of color, where that line is precipitously lower than that red line we're looking at right now. So women are losing out right from the start. And this is something we really need to fix, and we can do it together. The last thing I'll say is, as we all know, the pandemic has made the gap even worse. So let's look at the pandemic effects and look at how it's affected women's careers. Well, before the pandemic, we were making small strides every year. And since the McKinsey Lean In Women in the Workplace report, which is what I just shared with you, has been tracking it for 6 years, those strides have been small, but we have made some inroads. Unfortunately, the pandemic pushed out more than 2.3 million women out of the workforce, and that's since February of 2020, reducing the women's labor force participation rate to 57%, which is the lowest it's been since 1988. That's setting women back 33 years in one fell swoop. The shocking thing here is that more than a quarter of the women who became unemployed during the pandemic said it was due to a lack of childcare. So we have an ecosystem that is tricky and depends on childcare and schooling in order to keep women working. The last thing I'll say is the pandemic has had a significant impact on mental health. 59% of women surveyed recently felt that remote work negatively affected their well-being. The way I think about it is maybe it's because women have so much multitasking to do, and in the pandemic, they were handling childcare duties, work, being the school teacher, having family responsibilities, and doing it all at the same time. In the past, they've talked a little bit about the double shift and how when women are working and then they come home and they work. And we weren't going anywhere, and we were working even triply hard. So I'm going to now shift and talk about the 5 pillars that I believe women need to build a bridge to the future. The first is why I started reacHIRE. The first pillar is all about creating seamless career on-ramps and off-ramps. We know that having a family creates a natural off-ramp for women, but the research shows that there are other factors that play a significant role in the decision to leave the workforce, including how you feel about your professional status, the career opportunities you perceive to be in front of you, and your personal health and/or aging parents. It's clear that we need more concrete ways for women to take control of their careers without penalty. The fact is that 30% of women who leave the workforce don't ever return. And of the ones that do, only 40% find full-time jobs. Women need to have options at different times to fit their life and their goals. And as I said, at reacHIRE, we've been at this for almost a decade, partnering with companies to ensure that women have ways to leverage their skills in new ways and get back in. There's so much talent sitting on the sidelines who want and need to get back to work, and we need to create a path back. We need more options for creating meaningful work and to make and ensure that women can have a livelihood. Another interesting thing on this slide you'll see is that 84% number, and that actually ties to the fact that a recent survey from millennials said that millennials were expecting to actively take a career break. That was before the pandemic, and that actually was millennials that didn't even have a significant other or had planned a family. Millennials, it's clear, have different ways of thinking about how work fits into their lives. And now with the pandemic, we know that career breaks are the norm, and a career break shouldn't be and can't be a career breaker. So let's go to the second pillar, pay equity. Nationally, women get paid 18 cents less per dollar than men do. But here we are in Concord, Massachusetts, and in the Boston area, it's a 30-cent difference. So women in Boston are making 30 cents less on the dollar for the same job as men. And that's according to the Boston Women's Workforce Council. If women and men were paid the same amount for jobs that they did, it wouldn't have to be always the woman that needed to off-ramp. Now let's go to the third pillar, which is access to affordable and accessible childcare. Childcare has to become more affordable and accessible for all. So it's no longer an economic decision for a woman to stay at home, but a personal one. I can't tell you how many people I know that made decisions to stay at home because it was less expensive than sending their child to daycare and still working. Of course, we know that the government has recently proposed the American Families Plan, which could support more affordable childcare. But corporations also need to recognize that childcare is a business issue too. Data from the Brookings Institute in May of 2020 also shows that the United States GDP could be 5% higher if women participated in the workforce at the same rate as men. So let's go now to the fourth pillar, which is flexible work options. We've certainly seen with the pandemic that everyone's at home, and work and family and personal obligations have all blended together. The best companies will meet women where they are going forward. And the pandemic has certainly proven that we all can work from home and be even more efficient, too efficient. We're all working triply hard, and everything is fraying. So working from home, offering part-time roles, offering reduced hours, having that flexibility to do hybrid work where you're in the office sometimes and at home other times, without the complete loss of one's career trajectory is really critical. And as I always say, I know my life has not been like this, but I don't know anybody's that has. Career paths are not a straight line. They need to be more fluid and meet women where they are when they're at an individual moment and become more like a bridge versus a ladder. So let's go to that fifth pillar, which is all about providing different supports, additional supports, because guess what? The world of work is still mostly male. In most companies, women are in the minority and hold a much smaller number of leadership roles. In fact, and I just looked at this yesterday for this talk, 3 out of every 4 senior executive roles are held by men. That means that every senior woman is outnumbered by a lot. And how are we going to fix this? I believe it's all about building a community of peers so that they can better navigate through and around the many challenges women encounter. And it's about learning from seasoned male executives. It's creating safe spaces where women feel more comfortable speaking about issues and learning how to propel their career, sometimes up, sometimes left, sometimes right, and sometimes taking a step off for a little while. And in all our work with companies and different cultures, we know that whether you are early in your career and need a roadmap to help guide you as you begin your journey, whether you're in mid-career trying to juggle work and family, maybe you're part of that sandwich generation or you're dealing with aging parents, so many things at the same time that you're managing, as well as teams at work, whether you're a woman of color looking for more role models that you can learn from and emulate, or a woman that's just on the maternity journey. Whether you're any one of these women, you could benefit from more advice and support, trusting peer connections to help you grow your skills and help you better navigate, no matter what age or stage you're at. And that's why my company created a new tool called Aurora. That's a digital tool with a human connection that helps more women thrive and rise in their companies. Let's face it, hybrid work is here to stay, and with it brings new opportunities and new challenges. And that's what we're going to talk about in a little bit. But with more women working outside the office, it's even more critical to build community, build networks, and feel a true sense of connection and belonging. New tools and new technologies need to be embraced, and companies need to invest in them now and invest in women now to meet women where they are and change that trajectory of women in work. As you remember from that slide earlier, the women in the workplace slide, we have a ways to go, and we need to push hard to build on the 5 pillars for women to truly advance. But now I want us to take a step back, because if you remember that first slide I showed you, where we started with Louisa May Alcott, who was so talented in storytelling, but really saved her family from poverty, all the way up to the Bumble CEO, who, created a unicorn and is a self-made billionaire. Let's look at where we are today. And I'm so proud to share how many women are out there doing so many interesting things and are each moving the needle in their own way to really create change. And that's exactly what the pioneering women did back when Concord started. And, look at what's happened, whether it's women making inroads in local and national government, in sports, in climate change, in art, biotech, the movies with Chloe Zhao, even Samantha Power, which I'll give a shout out to because she's a fellow Concordian who has been an ambassador to the United Nations and is the new administrator for USAID. Or Reshma Kilawarami, the CEO of Vertex. Wow, in Boston. Look at the women that we have as role models that are role models for tomorrow's women. And we had a hard time figuring out who to put on this slide because there are so many women that are doing so many powerful things to move the needle forward. So hats off to the women who came before us, who had the courage to blaze a trail. And so much of what was quote unquote conquered and highlighted in this great museum exhibit is about how women throughout history have campaigned and advocated, galvanizing change for all of us. If this is what we look like today, you remember what we looked like in the 1800s, and this is how we're going to inspire the young girls who will become the future leaders of tomorrow. A quote I just love is from Amanda Gorman on the lower left of your slide here, the nation's first youth poet laureate, who said, "For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it." We need to continue fighting for our rightful place. And so, in true Concordian fashion, let's keep up the tradition of the great women before us and band together. May the revolution continue. Thank you so much.
That's wonderful, Addie. Thank you so much.